Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Audrey William is a principal advisor at Ecosystem, based in Sydney, Australia. Before Ecosystem, Audrey spent over 18 years at Frost and Sullivan, so she's well known as an experienced and insightful industry analyst. A few days ago, Audrey published a blog on LinkedIn focused on business continuity planning for contact centres. And given the present crisis across the entire industry, I called her to ask a few COVID-19 related questions focusing on that blog. Okay, you published a blog recently. I saw it on LinkedIn, and that was about building a BCP plan for contact centres. You didn't directly mention COVID-19 in the article, but the first item of advice in your blog is to ensure that agents can work at home. So do you think that this virus caught everybody out? Because normally their BCP is focused on ensuring a regular power supply, fire, earthquakes, all these kind of normal office problems.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I think if you look at how contact centers plan BCP, and they're very good at that. There's so much of rigor that goes into BCP, but for a lot of contact centers, whether the outsourcers or the in-house contact centers, it's always been around some of the natural disasters that you mentioned. And they've been very good around, backup and redundancy. For example, if one site fails, if there is a network outage, they always have planned for these. But I think COVID-19, it has caught everyone off guard because there are two elements to it. One is the human element. So, for example, if my agents get sick, if they have to be in isolation for 2 weeks, or if there's just agent attrition because of the pressures they're facing, what does that mean now to my capacity planning? And all of a sudden, I've got a reduced, pool of agents I can work with around this, height of activity that we're seeing. And then the other aspect of it is there is the lockdown imposed by government across the globe. And as we have seen, Mark, the rules are getting stricter in each country every day. And that just means that moving agents to the home had to happen immediately and done with great urgency, which is something most contact centers have not been prepared for.
Yeah, and part of that preparation, or part of the reaction to this problem, has been that a lot of the customer experience specialists have just kind of handed a laptop to their employees and sent them home. And I know that you mentioned in your article that really there has to be more process. They need to be doing more than just this. So what are the kind of tools and requirements that they really should be handing to agents?
Yep. So I think, apart from handing the laptop to the employee, actually before that, I think some outsourcers I know have a BYOD policy. So it just means that they have already secured these devices with, mobile device management, mobile application management applications. So similarly, I think security is a big element when you hand that laptop to the agent. Because you really have to make sure that there are all these functions around, where the information is stored, for example. If the information should be stored in a particular centralized location in the cloud, and all that has to be looked at, with great detail. And then there is the compliance aspect on voice and non-voice calls, because all of a sudden you're having agents at home, and they're also now handling a lot of, probably web chat requests. And, when you're under a lot of pressure as well, you're typing very fast, very quickly on these channels. Sometimes the agents might, say something wrongly. And so compliance becomes a very big part of this. So I think just ensuring that compliance on voice and non-voice calls are adhered to. I think one very important aspect is definitely ensuring that there is a reliable network, because you're talking about now having that, that cloud architecture, which has become so important in times like this, because you've got to get the agent up and going almost immediately. You can make changes very easily. And so that network is very important. And that can be a big problem for some geographies. And in fact, I think with a lot of agents also working from home, let's say in the apartment, I know that just chatting with clients recently, the quality of the calls have been compromised because of the overload on the network. So these are problems that are starting to occur, and it really has to be looked into very seriously. I think the other thing is, definitely the agents need a conducive environment. So ensuring that if you've got 5 family members at home, that there's, when the family's talking or chatting, that doesn't come through. I think one thing that's sometimes overlooked is, having a superior quality headset that plays a very important role in not just the noise cancellation, but today a lot of these headsets, they come with great analytics built onto it. And these are special headsets meant for contact centers. So it means that the supervisor can get a lot of analytics if the agent is nervous, over talking, or the agent has been quiet for long periods. What does that mean? But the headset also allows them to have a lot of these facilities to make them feel like they're having a good conversation with the client, and also vice versa, so that the customer can actually hear the agent well. I think another very important aspect, Mark, when agents are now working from home is training. So whilst there's there's been a lot of training and coaching, and that's a very big part of how contact centers are run. Now when agents are working from home, whilst you can still have a lot of online training and gamification, I think it's also important to note that the mode of work has changed. They are now working from home, and they're constantly in front of their desks or their PCs. You probably have to now not micromanage them, maybe not even give them too much training, maybe give them more breaks in between. So I think these are some of the soft factors that need to be looked at. And I think the final point I'll add to that is now that the agents are at home, it's so important for them to communicate with their supervisors or communicate with someone if they need help. And so video conferencing tools become really important for that personal touch. But also if there are certain issues emerging every day, let's say on a particular topic like refunds or something around cancellations or something around wanting some information about something the government has just released, then some chat sessions can be managed on Teams and Slack, because that's where these collaboration tools become really powerful. And if you manage them by topic, it just means that the agents can now go in to look for what's necessary for them.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you mentioned there about the different tools and communication tools specifically. And I know that in your blog you mentioned about using messaging and other apps to keep customers more informed than usual. But can these tools also play more of a role for the remote teams? I mean, do they need better and more communication tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about virtual agents, virtual assistants, or bots. They're not just for customers, they can be actually used for agents, especially during times like this when there's a crisis and the agent really is under pressure to also try and take the next call. If they can get as much assistance as possible from the data that's coming through machine learning or through knowledge management systems or through these virtual assistants, then that's really going to empower them in real time when they're having that chat with the customer. So absolutely, I think it's how do you use these tools then for the agents. I think FAQs as well, but FAQs that are developed for the agents by topic. And then, as I mentioned in my earlier point, I think collaboration tools like Teams and Slack, absolutely, because agents then just know where to look for information and they're kept informed all the time as changes occur.
And you mentioned also about automation, AI, self-service. I mean, all of these kind of tools that can also help to deflect calls before they even reach the contact center. But given that we're sort of in a crisis situation right now, how quickly can any of these tools actually be set up?
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely not easy. And especially in a crisis, like you mentioned, if you want to set up a conversational AI platform right now, it's not going to happen in 1 week or a couple of days, because these platforms, a lot of the good conversational AI platforms that I've used, or I've been exposed to, even when I've spoken to some of the vendors, these platforms take a good year or so before they can perform well. And that's because there are many different permutations, thousands of permutations that have to be understood, and the machine has to learn before they get everything in order, or before it can really be used well. So I think when it comes to conversational AI, it may not be something that can be up and running right away, because the customer might then get frustrated and then end up placing a call to the contact center, which defeats the purpose. But I think these platforms should be planned in the future. So I think contact centers should still start thinking about it, because in the event that something like this happens again, they've got this as a backup now. So they absolutely should start planning for this. I think one tool that's also important is email. I know that contact centers are taking a long time to respond to emails now, more than 24 hours, more than 48 hours. But I think if customers want some answers, and if they can wait, then rather than put pressure on that inbound call, sending an email is actually not a bad idea, because responses are coming in. I think if you look at social media messaging as well, and that's one way of personalizing the service. So if a customer is really upset about something from that email, the call center can now reach the customer through WhatsApp, for example. And then I think the other important thing is apps today. If you look at some of the apps out there, from the airlines and from some of the other industries, as well as government departments, there's a lot of information today for individuals, where they can get a lot of information without the need to call a call center. You can get so much of information coming through pop-ups now. When you turn on the app, they'll notify you about some changes. And similarly, I think the websites are becoming so rich now with information. I'm starting to notice that change, and that is just to say that don't call us. Our call volumes are high, and you can see that now. These websites have information in great detail saying that call volumes are high. Don't call us. If you want this, go through point 1, point 2, point 3. So something like that. And I think these are all ways that you can reduce load on inbound calls.
Yeah, so you're saying that there is a crisis and there is an immediate response to that, which is to get your agents working from home. But in parallel with that, you need to be thinking of 2021 and what kind of automation or self-service can you be introducing to reduce the load in future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's, really important, because if you can plan a lot of these self-service capabilities that I just spoke about, Mark, then it just means that in the future, you'll be really well prepared for this. I mean, it's not an easy situation at all, because in times like crisis, especially if it's got something to do with some payment you're waiting for, or you're really confused about something, or it could be something pertaining to your health, then you really want to speak to an agent. I think that's still the priority right now. Everybody wants to speak to an agent. If they can just dial a number, they rather explain themselves. And so I think that's not going away. In fact, that's increasing, and that's why we're seeing this meltdown. But I think if a lot of the other channels are open, and whilst there may be a delay in the response, for example, like the email, I think it still helps, because the customer is waiting, and it's not so urgent, but you're also helping reduce that load to the contact center. So I think contact centers will have to get really innovative moving forward to pay attention to these non-voice channels.
Okay, and then so finally, just in general, what are your clients and the companies that you're talking to there in Australia, what are they saying about the crisis and how it's directly affecting them? And is there any consensus yet on how long this might last before we see some kind of normality again?
Yeah, so I think, from a lot of the interviews I've conducted, and also just speaking to just contact center operators, actually in the Asia Pacific region, managing hundreds and thousands of seats, um, and also in Australia, I think it's very clear that most of them never expected this to occur. They never expected the scale of this. And I think how it's impacting them has made them think very differently about BCP. But I think one thing that's definitely going to change after all of this, Mark, is definitely that home-based agents are here to stay. And I think for a long time the industry talked about it. It never really took off. There was a lot of positive talk around it, but this time it's really here to stay. And we might see a lot of the outsourcers across the globe in Asia and here in Australia as well think very differently now about saying, hey, you know what, we don't need to house all the agents in a building. We don't need to have them there. If this is going to work really well for some of our clients, then why not go with the home-based agent model? And I think there are some very successful learnings they can take from some outsourcers, I think in North America, where this is a norm for them. They've been running their business based on home-based agents, and they deal with multiple clients, and they've run it successfully. So I think a lot of outsourcers and in-house contact centers can learn and understand how they've got the model right and how it's made it work. So I think it's absolutely going to change. It's just going to change everything for contact centers, and it's going to open up a whole new world, I believe. In terms of your second question, how long before any normality? I think it's one that's very hard to answer. Some are saying that this could go on for 6 months. Some are saying that this could go on for a year. So it's really hard. No one really knows, and it seems to be just a very challenging situation right now.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.